what a challenge, and what a promise. Just imagine a New Deal. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for you as a first-year student? Do you begin a New Deal right now while you transition to this university? And how does your personal New Deal look like while you begin your new life here at Leuphana? And also imagine, what does it mean for you as a citizen and as a member of civil society? Do you think we need a New Deal for our society? And how could your contribution look like? And with these rather big questions, I'd like to say, welcome to Leuphana. And welcome to this opening ceremony. Welcome at a special place, and also welcome at a special time. As you know, we are in a special time. And not only because we're still in the midst of a pandemic, not only because we as a university try to return to university life in presence, but also because our society really faces challenges. Challenges that have been unprecedented during recent years and decades. Climate change, democracy, social cohesion, social justice, a digital society. These are just some of our challenges, but that's why we ask the question this year, do we need a New Deal? And because you're in a special place, you are at Leuphana, and you are at a university now. And let me promise you, a university can be a magical place. A magical place that might be defined by three characteristics: by courage, by presence, and by seriousness. By courage, because to grow, to change something, even to change yourself, it needs courage. You need courage to deal with insecurities, with experiments, with exploration, with insecurities that arise in processes of academic research, but also in processes of personal development and of social change. And a university is essentially a place where you could, and maybe you should, questioning everything, and especially yourself. Who are you? Who do you want to be? Where do you come from? Where do you want to go? And at the same time, a university can be a safe place. A safe place for experiencing insecurities. A place where you can find an academic community that stands strongly and firmly by your side when you deliberately face questions, challenges, insecurities, while you explore, experiment, and ask questions. Now let's switch to presence. Presence because studying well needs presence. It needs your presence. And it needs presence of every single member of this university. And of course, this is even more true this year. After 3 semesters of basically digital presence, when we try to come together now as a university again physically. And just imagine how being a student would be without being present. Maybe you'd still learn something, but you'd sit alone in a chamber studying your books. Maybe you'd still write papers, but you wouldn't know anybody who'll read them. And you'd never get feedback anyway. And maybe you'd still explore the world, but there would not be anyone with whom you could discuss your impressions. And unfortunately, that's what many of us, many of you, have experienced over the past 3 semesters. But now, let's turn to the opposite. You now have the richness of this university at hand. You'll find fellow students to talk to and learn from. You'll find your professors and lecturers to discuss with. You'll find initiatives and projects to explore or to found. And you'll find a warm-hearted community, a community that welcomes you as their new members. And please later, when you're in your project groups, or just right now as you listen, please do me a favor. Do it right now. Just look around you. Who do you see there and there and there? Look around you. Who are your new fellow students? What do you think about them? Who are they? And what are their hopes, their aspirations? What might they want to achieve? What might they want to contribute to the development of our society? And who might they want to be? And maybe you think about it, what they could teach you. And what they can learn from you, specifically. The third point was seriousness. Because maybe learning starts when we are willing to really open up, when we are willing to trust each other. And I think trust in these times, by the way, is something very important. When we take, in other words, each other seriously. So trusting each other and taking each other seriously in our differences, in our different experiences, in our different perspectives is maybe one of the most important cultural elements of a university. So let me tell you, for us at Leuphana, it is the most important thing to take you seriously, to take each other seriously, with all our different perspectives. And at the same time, we ask you as well to take yourself seriously, to take your fellow students seriously, to take your professors and lecturers seriously. And that's why at Leuphana College, your studies don't just start with an orientation week, as it is true in many other places, but you will start with an opening week, with trust and encouragement, with dealing with big questions of our time. Not only with technical or organizational instructions about the university, but you are being challenged from the very first day, which is today, with possibilities to engage and to contribute, and with the question of the New Deal. And in doing so, we trust you. We trust that you know why you are here, why you decided to study, what your questions are. And even if you don't know it yet, we trust you that you want and that you will find out. So once again, let me start this opening ceremony by saying, welcome, dear first-year students. Willkommen, liebe Studierende, willkommen in Lüneburg, willkommen an der Leuphana und willkommen zur Leuphana Startwoche. And with that, please let me introduce you to the president of the university, Sascha Spoun.
Dear students, welcome at Leuphana, welcome at university. We all here are aware that you had hard months before coming here, when you had to pass your final exams in a lockdown situation, when you had to postpone plans for apprenticeships and stay abroad, even change them, and nothing was as expected. All the more, I'm glad to welcome you here on campus after 3 turns of pure online classes, all 3 turns of virtually no academic life on campus. To study means much more than to attend classes. It also means to form an academic community, a community of learning, of curiosity, of suffering, of excitement, of daily new expectations, and finally of success. Welcome to our academic community. We aspire to offer you a stimulating and fruitful higher education, an education you will benefit from for the rest of your life. What will be the core of your higher education? To what extent does it go beyond your education at school? In brief, the core will be our dedication to teach you about and your willingness to learn how to make a scholarly inquiry. This is why you are here. And the opening week will be your first experience towards this aim. It is intended as a first step to learn where daily inquiries stop and where scholarly inquiries will continue and start. I intend to give you a tiny example of it, a small bit of all the bytes and gigabytes in the scientific world, And I hope by this perspective you can easily see the further step into the deepness that science and research do. It is a commonplace in public debates that many things in our societies go wrong. Climate change, social injustice, millions of refugees, to mention just a few. They are all alarming. By consequence, public and political debates are most about how to change things and how to prevent future disasters. This premise for all these discussions is mainly this: many things go wrong, we cannot continue like that. It might be true, and I think it is, but scholarly inquiry goes further. In the year of 1933, when Europe stood at the very brink of a huge catastrophe, the British philosopher John McMurray asked, "Why are we making such a mess of things when all the circumstances are in our favor?" Take a closer look. The first part of this question exactly meets the current debates. Why are we making such a mess of things? However, the second part adds an important observation: when all the circumstances are in our favor. Where are we today? I believe that today many things are much more in our favor than in the Europe of 1933. We have a very high standard of wealth and health, a high standard of education, a low rate of unemployment, and in many respects, we have equal rights and total freedom. We never had more opportunities to live a life that we want to live, more opportunities to engage, to create, to accomplish, to improve, to intervene, and to omit. To take up McMurray's word, all the circumstances are in our favor. Things have been never better for us, but nonetheless, we are making such a mess of things. We ruin our future. Why this? I hope you see what happened by the addition. We can go deeper. Instead of continuing asking about the mess we do and about what has to be done for avoiding it, we add considering the opportunities we have. We add considering ourselves. As a result, there is astonishment. All the circumstances are in our favor. We have so much knowledge and opportunities, but we are making a mess out of it. Now, an ocean opens up, an ocean of further questions, of wondering, of theses, of dilemmas, and of hope to find the right answer once a day. You see, it was just one step, a single addition, but the effect is tremendous. We start to go deeper. We start to initiate a scholarly inquiry. And as I said, this is why you are here, going deeper that you have gone before, for starting to ask where many others came to a stop. And this is what I ask you for doing in the next days, weeks, and months, to go deeper, not to stop where you are used to do so, not to stop where you are used to give up asking. Continue, go forward, go deeper. Don't stop. This will be the threshold of entering university, not physically, but intellectually. My colleagues will guide you, will encourage you, will stimulate you, and they will be demanding. Scholarly inquiry is half fun and half pain. It is hard work, no pain, no gain. But I promise you, it will be much rewarding. The more you invest, the more you dare, the more you will benefit of your education. Dear students, I wish you all the best, not only for your first days for the opening week, for your first semester, but for all your studies at Leuphana. It all starts today.
I now have the pleasure to introduce you to a highly interesting guest, to Maja Göpel. Maja Göpel has been one of the most prominent figures in public debate in Germany during the past years and months. Not only, but also with her best-selling book, Unsere Welt neu denken. And she is a renowned political economist, a sustainability expert, and a transformation researcher. And her focus lies on the question how we may achieve the transition into a sustainable future, linking environmental questions with those of social justice and societal participation. Maja Göpel is also co-founder of the Scientist for Future initiative, and currently she is honorary professor here at Leuphana University. And I just can say, welcome to Leuphana Opening Week, Maja.
Thank you very, very much. And a warm extended hello from Werder to Lüneburg. Great to see you all again.
Great to see you too. So let's talk a little bit about the New Deal. So I was told that as a teenager, you ask yourself a question. And the question was, why don't we create as society the world we wish for as individuals? So what's your answer today? Why don't we do that?
I feel I'm still a bit on the way of finding the answer. And I think it's been a mix of it all. One of the key elements for me when I started looking at reasons to questions why we wouldn't proceed on making things more sustainable, on distributing wealth more equally, on saying maybe there's a limit to what we need to consume and possess, very firmly lay within the economic paradigms that I was then taught at university. Because I did go through all different disciplines. I was very fortunate back then that that was allowed. And I think that's one of the benefits at Leuphana, that you can open your horizon before you start closing it in on becoming an expert in one area. And it was literally the course on macroeconomics where I felt, ooh, there at least I've got an idea now why it seems so difficult to argue for more sustainable societies, because the way that economics is looking at the world and looking at humans and nature is a very abbreviated way, we might say, a very blind way, we might say, when it comes to really understanding the qualities of both nature and humans. And so even though sustainable development says it's about human needs and their satisfaction today and in the future, and to safeguard the qualities of the regeneration of ecosystems for that, we don't have any qualitative understanding when we only put price tags on it and measure utility as an increase in what I can consume as the well-being of people. And then natural capital with prices on different chunks and pieces that don't allow for us to understand how they're woven into regenerating webs of life. And this is what I've been focusing on. And I think a lot of the solutions will lie there, that we change that paradigm. And then we come into cooperation. I'm sure this is what we'll talk about now too.
That's very interesting, because my next thought was when I thought about this conversation we just have, I don't know if all of our first-year students know what the New Deal actually was. So the New Deal has been a series of economic and social reforms enacted by President Franklin Roosevelt from 1933 to 1938 in the US, United States, that laid the foundation for a very strong period of US history. And I can say one of my old professors always has said that Roosevelt has founded a great arch, like an economic arch, basically, that led to Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, and then Ronald Reagan and the conservatives in the US had built another arch. And interestingly, he argued back then, which was in 2014, I think, he said, ever since Reagan, a new arch still had to begin. There was no other new arch that had begun already. So interestingly, it might be the question, if we are at a point right now where a new arch can actually begin. And so my question is, do you think it's time today for a next New Deal, and why exactly? And is it a fundamental paradigm shift?
Mm-hmm. Well, if I just jump in a little bit on putting some of the pieces together, what were in the New Deal, because I do agree with you. It was literally at a point in time where a system that was in place was so notably broken that the costs of maintaining it and the inequality of maintaining it were so high that it became the role of the state to reorganize also how markets work. And I think this is for me, and I really recommend everybody to just, I think, read the fireside chats of Roosevelt on how he's addressing the nation. It's not very long, but it does say things where I just wish we'd heard those from political representatives today. Because he thanks the population for the trust in allowing for him to take decisions that will have strong structural organizing effects. And then he elaborates out of the understanding why he has to reorganize a market structure that has become too monopolized and too unequal, and thus allows for a few market players to keep on going an unfair route in their business models, and thus hampering the majority of market players that would like to play a fair game. So it was a very clear task of the state to say we have to weed an economic complex system like markets every now and then, because we see there is a tendency of concentration in there. And that's to the benefit of everyone. It's not just cracking down corporations, how we have the Reagan arc rhetoric now, but there it was very clear that states and markets would go together. And the other thing I find really important is that he's clearly made priorities in saying, what are we going to invest in to build up now? And one thing that I think is not, and there we come to the Green Deal today, is not so much known, is that he did say we have to have a job guarantee. That's also now being discussed again. He was saying, otherwise, many of the young men will get stupid ideas. It was very clearly on the men back then. But I think not so many women were in the workplace at the time. So the unemployment question, and then have them work on the reestablishing of nature, to say that is really a job that benefits everybody because we've run down natural resources too much. And to look at the kinds of infrastructures you have to have in place. Back then it was railway and others, so that it would serve the wider society what these people were paid to be doing through state money. And for me, we're really, when we're looking at what is being discussed today as things that need to shape differently in the Green Deal, and then people saying we need a Green New Deal, so not forget about those social elements, it's very similar to what we had back then.
This is interesting as well. Because you referred to Roosevelt not only in terms of content, so what was his strategy, what was his proposal as a New Deal, but you referred to him also in terms of a communicator. Like he did a brilliant communication. So I would like to ask you about your opinion on each of these two aspects. Maybe first, what do you think could be part of a New Deal today? How would a New Deal look like? What's in it? From, in your opinion, of course. And what could our students discuss over the next week?
Well, I think when we look at the crisis that we're in today, we see obviously the environmental crisis, and not only climate change. That's really come to the fore, but from a planetary boundary point of view, we do have biodiversity and the use of land at the very core of do we allow in the next 10 years, and that's hiding behind the term nature positive. So there's a whole idea that we have to not only bend the trend on CO2 to go down and be absorbed more, but also for the absorption of CO2, we have to build up the ecosystems that have done that traditionally. So the sinks, like the oceans and the grasslands and the woods and the forest, etc. But also, in addition to build up biodiversity, build up the way we store water. I don't know who's seen it, but we have another new warning about a water crisis looming. So the whole provisioning for human health to really restore this hides behind the idea of nature positive, so that we reorganize our economic system, that it doesn't take and extract and degenerate, but rebuild and regenerate the ecosystems. So that is exactly what the Green Deal is trying to do when it says decarbonization, but also circularity. And then we can look at, is biodiversity enough in there or no? So this is really, how do we find the multi-solving solutions in the way that we run our economies and enable people to find business models that allow for us to harvest this, and to call this a value creation activity. And then also, what would economic instruments obviously be that count as this as a positive contribution rather than a loss of short-term profits, which is exactly what happens today. If you want to invest in building something up that will be healthy and nicely integrated again, as a lot of agroecology, for example, is, it will only be there in 7 years, more or less. So there's a lot of short-termism that's inhibiting the transformation today. So that for me is another really crucial aspect. How do we get out of the short-termism that is in business models and the ideas of having venture capital, for example, 3 to 5 years, and then I want to have my investment out. So what's the coalition between public and patient capital and private activities that we can bring this out? Also governance regimes. Do we have a possibility to really solve everything by markets? No. As soon as we go to biodiversity, we see it's very spatial. It becomes very regional because it's webs of life. We're not as lucky as in CO2 where we can peg a price on molecules. Biodiversity needs space and intricate linkages between different types of existing beings. So how do we go regional instead of thinking it can only be done by the market? And the third aspect that I find really crucial then again is how do we make sure that the way that we're printing money, giving it out to the economy, or also subsidize which types of innovations so that the social side is always buffered. And I think we've seen that very clearly. And from my understanding, it is the biggest challenge for climate policy to be accepted now, not necessarily in not understanding the urgency, but in being so concerned that then my household budget, because of increased prices for example, CO2, is going to be too low to afford rents. I might not be affording cars anymore. It's been really played badly in the political campaigns, but I think we also have to understand that we have, for a good amount of people in societies, real issues if prices go up. But then to say it's not an environmental policy concern, but that's finance, fiscal, and social policy that needs to allow for people to be safe in a European context, where we say the well-being and the social welfare state is something that we hold on to with our values, so that they don't have to fear this. But we're really looking at why does it become ludicrously expensive to pay rent? And in Berlin, it's been in 1 quarter, 10% increase in rent or pay what you have to pay if you want to get a flat. That's crazy. And that has to do with extraction from financial actors that are mostly not even based within Europe or already have far too much money. So we have to bring that social and environmental together and really, really make sure that we're looking at what kind of provisioning. One of the taglines that Roosevelt also basically was looking for is universal basic services. So access to education, access to healthcare, access to housing, access to the daily things that we need in mobility are really important things that we should not necessarily all leave to the market. If we notice that access for the lower strata of society with less income is challenged to a degree that it really creates fear. And that for me is exactly why we're talking about a new contract, a new societal contract. Because we have to look at those distributive factors.
You have touched on many things right now, many different aspects.
You've got a whole week, no? So.
I mean, are you saying that our students should solve everything next week? Okay, deal. That's a new deal we can take. So you heard it. No, what I wanted to ask is, you touched on economical questions, you touched on social questions, you touched on ecological questions, and it to me, I think it becomes very clear that we need to think these three elements together in a way. So if you look on how to organize that process, what's your answer? How do we as a society, how do we as organizations, how do we as individuals organize the discussion to find a new deal, to agree on a new deal, to come to a decision? How does that work and what do we need for it?
For me, that is exactly where the communication bit is really important, because but also research and the way we do research. And I'm coming from transformation research as a transdisciplinary endeavor, but also a discipline that says when we're looking, or a field rather, when we're looking at persistent problems, because that's where transformation studies usually start, we try to understand the origins and the root causes of that problem that keep it in place. And to really put the question first, what is it that we're trying to change? What is it that we're trying to solve? And we see very often that we're not taking the time for this analysis of really the system within which that problem emerges and pertains, but already are in the solution space. And then we amend on the solutions, but we don't necessarily go into understanding what are the real drivers behind it. And for me, the shift when I say we need to look at minimum wages, on lowering what people have to pay for rent, etc., is already widening the system, because usually we're only looking at how can the CO2 tax be shaped in a way so that it's being paid back as a dividend to the population. So in itself, that instrument is going to be socially progressive. Also important, but it misses the wider system in which we will have the same problems if we're trying to put prices on nature in other spaces as well. And this is where I think we need to start to always put the question of purpose first. Where do we want to go? What is this supposed to achieve? And then we can look at every instrument, we can look at every innovation, and we can look at the KPIs, the leading ideas about key performance indicators. So if we were to find a successful solution to this, what would that look like in terms of measurement criteria? So it can be prices, but it can also be amounts of people in jobs. It can be amounts of CO2 bound in the ground, and it can be qualitative indicators as well. And that's a strong message from all system thinking people. Don't be too quantified. A lot of the things that we need in these turbulent times are, as Sascha also said, trust, a way that we relate to each other, that we give credit in the original sense. I mean, all money systems are trust systems in the end, right? I mean, there's nothing behind these numbers on the screen, but a trust in a system, in an institution, that means I have the right to access something. So this notion of what are good institutions, social capital in another term, and innovations that will allow for those to flourish, social innovation, etc., as important. So really start with what is it that we want to achieve? Where is the problem in all its dimensions? And then start looking in the solution space.
What you just said touched me quite a lot. By the way, I think all systems are trust systems, essentially. But you just said that very often we don't look deep enough. And I think the question that comes to my mind immediately is, what's the role for science? What's the role for universities in that game? Because personally, I strongly believe that universities have a responsibility to shape society or to deliver something that works towards a better future. But at the same time, it's just not enough to be activist, to just have an opinion, to just say something, because I think it is a rigor analysis that's needed, and you just said it. So I would be interested to know about your reflection on what's our responsibility as researchers, as students, as a university, as a scientific system? What do we need to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, it is basically the kind of tricky line that I've been walking on in the last 3 to 4 years. Because you're challenging also the identity of a system there. And I know Leuphana has been at the forefront of this, which is why I like being part of this faculty. Because I think when you also think about former times, we talk about the Enlightenment phase. And now there's quite a talk about we need a new Enlightenment so that we shed some of the paradigmatic ideas that we were talking about before, too economized and too chunked up way of looking at things, for example. And it was spaces, it was the salons in Paris back then, sounds a bit more funky maybe than a campus, but still it was places where people were speaking very freely about all the things that we call normal and established in a very critical way, but in a constructive critical way. And for me, that is the space where we go back to what is the essence of also scientific inquiry. It is to keep your skeptic mind in a non-antagonistic way. Yep. So you're really always challenging yourself again. And this is also what Milton Friedman even said, that we have to put the premises of our paradigms on the altar once in a while to question if they're still valid. And then interestingly, that profession has just kind of not done it very much anymore that he was in. So allow for critical thinking, allow for really opening up all the boxes with which we're later then performing, and to at the same time have the guts to bring that out, that there is a difference, as you just said, between rigorous method and rigorous transparency about what are your assumptions, why you're taking those, how those fit into models, and what are thus the stories that models, especially quantified models, are telling around the world, to always make that transparency, to regain trust. Because I think we had a lot of that avoiding or slipping, because we had a lot of self-claimed experts in talk shows, etc., knowing exactly what the country should be doing. So how do we defend the term expert slightly without meaning that no one's allowed to talk? That's my final sentence. That is not published in A-reviewed or A-ranked journals in multiple amounts, when we know that that kind of way of publishing keeps people away from being able to think wide, because the most publishing takes place in journals on very small, little incremental ways of changing the world or looking at particular items. So claim the term of a proper scientific approach to understanding the world, not get too much into how it's been defined, and thus also forecloses some of us that are not publishing like crazy, but are trying to communicate more. I get that attack right now, or she hasn't published much, so she shouldn't stand around as a scientist out in public. And at the same time, to also say, we still hold ourselves accountable to not speak on everything that we're invited to speak on, unless we have developed a proper understanding of it.
We don't have much more time, but I have one more question that I really want to ask you. What's your advice to our students, especially an advice how to deal with the overwhelming dimension of the problem? How do you get progress without being overwhelmed? Without saving the world just alone?
That's a key point, I think.
Or feeling. Such a feeling.
Once you start looking at the world from a systems view, you do understand how small you are in comparison to that huge web of life, and at the same time how many small activities all of a sudden can become tipping points. And so we're always looking at tipping points from the ecological point of view to say, oh, those are the ones we really should avoid. And then we have that on the social side where we can say, if the time's ripe, and this is what you said before, Christoph, that we're right now at a moment where paradigm shift seems to be taking place, then it is important that a lot of people speak up, because we see a lot of this uncomfort with the status quo and how it's being explained as being normal, etc. But people don't quite dare yet to say, look, is the Kaiser maybe naked, right? That was the young girl saying whenever it was still heralding that big Kaiser. I don't know, what's a Kaiser in English there? Big king. We'll go for king for now. Kaiser. And then all of a sudden, the young girl says, look, actually, he's naked. And it just needed that kind of trigger to be allowed to say something where everybody else kind of felt, aren't we a bit tricked here? But if that majesty person says it, we're not going to be challenging. And so I think we're in this moment now. And to never underestimate what then a good question in a friendly way, a good opposition to where you see power over trumping truth, for example, when you see discrimination taking place, it's really important to understand yourself, to be in this as a group and to step up for others that are showing guts to move the basin forward. So understand each other in a system as well, where we can really spill onto or over into other people's realms of activities. And
I think this might be...
This is my final sentence. Have enough sleep. It really is important.
Have enough sleep and try to understand the others, especially those with other perspectives. Let's take that as a last sentence for a very interesting talk. It's on my turn to thank you a lot for this conversation, for spending time with us and our students. It would be much nicer if we had time for questions now and an open discussion in an open auditorium. Let's have that next year again, hopefully. And for now, Maja, very, very warm thank you to you, wherever you are, and see you around at Leuphana as well
soon.
See you
around soon.
Thank you so much. And we now go on, and I have the pleasure of introducing to you the Kizuna Trio from the Orchester des Wandels, Orchestra of Change, Hedda Steingart, Markus Tollmann, Minako Uno Tollmann, who are for my position there, and we'll go on with another piece of music, Zoltan Cordially, the Intermezzo. relation to the city of Lüneburg. And therefore, it's now my pleasure to introduce you to Ulrich Mädge. And Ulrich Mädge is mayor of the beautiful city of Lüneburg, the Hanseatic city of Lüneburg, I have to say. And of course, he played, as a mayor, a very important role in developing our campus, in developing our university as well. And he'd like to welcome you. But before he does that, I have to highlight one little thing, because Ulrich Mädge has been mayor of Lüneburg since 1991, for 30 years now. And it is my special honor to welcome Ulrich Mädge today, because it will be his last time that he addresses you as first-year students, after I don't know how many times he did that. And it is exactly his last month as a mayor, because we just had elections. So it is my special pleasure today to introduce you and welcome Ulrich Mädge.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident Spoun, liebe Erstsemester, Studierende, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren. Ich freue mich, Sie heute in unserer schönen Hansestadt Lüneburg begrüßen zu dürfen. Auf dem Weg ins Audimax haben Sie es vielleicht schon gemerkt. An keinem Ort in der Hansestadt Lüneburg ist der Wandel dieser Stadt so sichtbar wie hier auf dem Campus. Wo früher eine Kaserne war, ist jetzt eine Universität. Es ist mir eine besondere Freude, dass Sie Ihren Start in Lüneburg hinlegen. In den kommenden Jahren wird hier Ihr zweites Zuhause sein. Zuhause, das ist der Bäcker, der schon von einem weiß, was man bestellen wird. Zuhause, das ist vom Busfahrer, Busfahrerin mit einem Lächeln begrüßt zu werden. Zuhause ist, dass einem nicht egal ist, dass Müll auf der Straße liegt. Und Zuhause ist, dass ich fast alles mit dem Fahrrad oder zu Fuß erreichen kann in unserer Stadt. Machen Sie davon Gebrauch. Und Zuhause, und das ist das Wichtigste für uns eigentlich in dieser Stadt, ist ein Gefühl der Gemeinschaft, der Geborgenheit. Für diese Gemeinschaft tragen wir alle in dieser Stadt die Verantwortung und nicht nur der Oberbürgermeister oder der Präsident der Universität. Liebe Studierende, Ihre Vorgängerinnen und Vorgänger haben nicht das Glück, die Hansestadt Lüneburg so kennenzulernen, wie sie es in den nächsten Tagen tun werden. Die Pandemie hat die Hansestadt Lüneburg und die ganze Welt für einen längeren Moment stillgelegt. Durch Corona hat zu Hause eine ganz andere, neue Bedeutung bekommen. Für die Gemeinschaft sind wir zu Hause geblieben. Selbst für die einfachsten Dinge wie Einkaufen gab es neue Regeln. Wir haben aber auch gelernt, dass Veränderungen möglich sind. Wie schnell haben sich daran gewöhnt, eine Maske zu tragen, wenn Sie einen Innenraum betreten? Und wie schnell haben sich daran gewöhnt, dass Sie jetzt wieder Konzerte besuchen können? Oder wie schnell haben Sie sich vielleicht nicht daran gewöhnt, dass Sie an der Uni nur online studieren konnten und jetzt wieder vor Ort sind? Wir haben alle erlebt, wie schnell wir uns daran gewöhnen, dass sich etwas verändert. Und das mehrfach. Und wir haben gesehen, dass Veränderung dringend notwendig ist in unserer Gesellschaft, in unserem Land, in unserer Politik, in unserem nachhaltigen Umgang. Zusammenhalt einerseits und leider auch tiefe Spaltung andererseits haben 1,5 Jahre lang unseren Alltag geprägt. Daraus müssen wir unsere Lehre ziehen. Meine Damen und Herren, liebe Studierende, New Deal, aktueller könnte das Motto Ihrer Startwoche nicht sein. Denn Corona hat unsere Gesellschaft, wie schon ausgeführt, auf die Probe gestellt. Und es hat sich gezeigt, einige Mitmenschen hat die Pandemie und die damit verbundenen Einschränkungen härter getroffen, als wir uns das jemals hätten vorstellen können. Auf Ihren Schultern, liebe Studierende, lasten als angehende Akademiker und Akademikerinnen jetzt die Aufgaben und die Verantwortung der neuen Zeit. Aber Verantwortung, so habe ich es in meinem Leben gelernt, ist immer eine Chance, nach vorn zu gehen. Man muss sie nur ergreifen und wahrnehmen, man muss sie annehmen. Unser Bundespräsident Frank-Walter Steinmeier hat 2017 in seiner Antrittsrede gesagt, Zukunft ist kein Schicksal, dem Gesellschaften ausgeliefert sind, erst recht nicht die demokratischen. Liebe Erstsemester, Sie sind die künftigen Entscheiderinnen und Entscheider in den Unternehmen, in der Politik, in der Gesellschaft. Sie sind die künftigen Forscherinnen und Forscher. Wer nicht, wenn Sie kann Ideen für eine bessere Gesellschaft entwickeln? Daher unsere Bitte, haben Sie den Mut, die Zukunft zu gestalten. Sie stehen vor großen Aufgaben und ich bin sicher, dass Sie sie genauso meistern anders als wir, als meine Generation. Aber nochmals an Herrn Steinmeier zu erinnern, Zukunft ist kein Schicksal. Wir haben Aufgaben wie die sozial gerechte Modernisierung unserer Gesellschaft, Klimaanpassung, Klimawandel, Berücksichtigung der Generationengerechtigkeit. Das sind unter anderem Themen, die keinen Aufschub dulden. Schauen Sie sich um. Da sind Ihre künftigen Mitstreiterinnen und Mitstreiter, die neben Ihnen, hinter Ihnen und vor Ihnen sitzen oder die Sie auf dem Campus demnächst treffen. Mit Ihnen werden Sie den Wandel vorantreiben können und müssen. Das wird nicht heißen, dass Sie sich immer einig sein werden, wie die Gesellschaft eine bessere sein kann und wie ein New Deal aussehen müsste. Darüber werden Sie diskutieren, denn eines weiß ich nach 30 Jahren im Amt eines Oberbürgermeisters: Diskussionen, Gespräche, das sind die Grundlagen für gute Entscheidungen. Sie sind die letzten Erstsemester, die mich in meiner Funktion als Oberbürgermeister hier sehen und die ich im Namen der Hansestadt Lüneburg begrüßen darf. Meine Amtszeit endet am 31. Oktober. Heute noch einmal zu Ihnen zu sprechen im Liebeskindgebäude, das sinnbildlich für den Wandel steht, den ich in den vergangenen 30 Jahren als Oberbürgermeister vorangetrieben habe, beglückt mich sehr. Es freut mich, dass wir die Hansestadt Lüneburg mit Präsident Sascha Spoun zu einem attraktiven Universitätsstandort machen konnten. An dieser Stelle vielen Dank hier an Herrn Spoun, dass wir gemeinsam diese Vision geteilt haben, sie verfolgt haben, trotz aller Widrigkeiten und umgesetzt haben. Und der Lohn, dass es gelungen ist, sind Sie, dass Sie hier studieren und dass Sie hier einige Zeit in Lüneburg verbringen wollen. Liebe Erstsemester, ich bin mir sicher, Ihre Entscheidung für die Leuphana und für die Hansestadt Lüneburg war die richtige. An der Leuphana Universität Lüneburg finden Sie die besten Vorbilder. Nehmen wir nur einmal Dr. Maja Göpel, die vor mir zu Ihnen gesprochen hat. Sie und Ihre Kolleginnen und Kollegen bereiten Ihnen bereits den Weg. Insbesondere Frau Göpel gehört zu den einflussreichsten Wissenschaftlerinnen, wie man in den vergangenen Tagen der Presse entnehmen konnte. Herzlichen Glückwunsch an dieser Stelle, Frau Göpel. Liebe Studentinnen und Studenten, nutzen Sie die Chancen, die Ihnen das Studium bietet. Aber nutzen Sie auch die Chancen, die die Hansestadt Lüneburg, die Region Lüneburg Ihnen bietet, sich selbst und Ihre Ideen für die Gemeinschaft zu verwirklichen. Unsere Hansestadt lebt von Ihren Ideen, die Sie als Studierende an der Leuphana einbringen. Machen Sie Lüneburg zu Ihrem Zuhause. Ich wünsche Ihnen einen guten Start in Ihr Studium. Herzlichen Dank und alles Gute.
Now let's imagine a time of happiness. Let's imagine a time of adventure, of discovery. And imagine a time in which you will be inspired and you will inspire others. Imagine yourself as being part of a community, the Leuphana community, a community that has sparkling eyes about what they do. The professors, the researchers, the lecturers, and your fellow students. Imagine maybe yourself with sparkling eyes, because you will have discovered something that really gets you, something that really inspires you, that really drives you, some kind of passion maybe for academic research or for societal change or for an initiative, political or entrepreneurial, or something else, maybe the love of your life. But this is how your student life at Leuphana could be, will be, maybe. How exactly? This is what I would now like to talk about with two of your fellow students, Silja Geest and Julia Gerlach, who are here as representatives of the General Students Committee, formerly known as AStA, not formally known actually on German, and with Steffi Hobuß, who is the Academic Director of Leuphana College. A very warm welcome to the three of you. And I would be very much interested to know, what are your ideas, what are your experiences about a time at university as a student or as a lecturer or professor that is able, or where you have experienced sparkling eyes, where you were inspired or where you could inspire others. What happened and what is necessary to achieve that status?
Like,
do you want to start? I don't know. Yeah.
Like, okay, all right. For me, studying is like creating my own toolbox, so to say, and yeah, that provides me so much skills and opportunities, and what I do exactly with this is completely in my power. And I really appreciate that kind of freedom, and that's what makes my eyes sparkling, I guess.
Yeah, I like the metaphor of the toolbox, but I also like to think of studying as thinking outside of the box. So when I sparkling eyes, I think were the people that I met and the different perspectives they brought into my life and the new topics, whether it was on a reading circle on feminism or pub quiz or a poetry slam on plastic pollution, all these encounters that happen completely next to my actual study plan and next to the courses and next to the classes that I took, the papers that I wrote, the exams that I passed. Those were the moments and the encounters that really shaped me, I would say, and where I had sparkling eyes, and I wish that every student can experience these moments. And now I'm really happy that we can have these encounters again on campus in presence after a long time of digital presence, as you formulated it.
Steffi, before you answer, let me, if I may, tell a little story about my first days in studying. My first seminar, when I entered, or we entered as students, there was a professor and who basically asked us, okay, what do you want to learn? So we answered, okay, you will tell us what we will learn, right? And he said, no. And then we said, okay, so what's happening now? And he said, okay, think about it. And if you don't know it now, we'll see you next week. I'll see you next week. So we left and walked out of the room. Next week, what happened was he was there again and asked us again, so what do you want to learn? So we told him something, what I don't remember. Next question he asked was, okay, how do you want to learn that? And we said again, we don't know. Isn't that what you want to tell us? And he said, no, I don't. Think about it. We see each other next week. Off he walked. So my question to you then is, Steffi, sich bilden in German is an active work.
Yeah.
What do you think is important about, like academically important about a good course of study?
Yeah, academically, much has been said before. I would like to highlight perhaps at least two concepts. The first one is community. The concept that has been mentioned often before this morning, but we at Leuphana College understand community as an academic community of learning and teaching together, and we would like to conceive this as a real academic community of doing things together. As you mentioned in your short anecdote, that's perhaps at first instant, it might sound not that much as it cared for sparkling eyes, but I'm deeply convinced at the end it led to sparkling eyes and inspiration and joyful, and insightful.
Beginning it was awful.
Yes, that's
And disturbing at least.
But community again. I have to confess, this morning I was really touched walking over the campus and seeing all that people, all you first semester students, people, colleagues, as during the last months, but all those you, the first semester students, again on campus. And I think that's really academically interesting, not just like a feeling of community, but really academically important, because when we say what we're doing at Leuphana College in the spirit of liberal education, that's the second concept, liberty or freedom. When we're studying in that spirit, in that mindset of liberal education, what does liberal mean in that sense? Not that we conceive each other as isolated individuals, each one just caring for her own growth and freedom, but as a real community of exchange, of dialogue, of learning from each other and learning together. Perhaps by those situations, like you mentioned, but of course most often joyful, inspiring, and that's for me the two, at the moment, the most important concepts, community and freedom.
I have another question to you, Silja and Julia. I think to study also means to engage in the university itself, to take part in shaping a university and shaping an academic community, because I think what students, from my experience at least, often underestimate is how important students are for research and for researchers and for the dialogue when it happens. So my question to you would be, what's your advice to your new fellow students how they can take part in shaping the university, in engaging in discussions and places where ideas can grow and develop that shape this academic community. What's your take on that?
So my advice would be to look around and see what possibilities they have, because there are so many possibilities and opportunities here. Whether it's in the AStA, we have a lot of societies where you can get engaged in other initiatives. There's really a broad range of them in Lüneburg, and you can always get involved in the topic of your heart, what really touches you, what moves you, and you can shape not only your personal way of life, you can also shape the university, the campus, the city of Lüneburg, but in general the whole society. And that's a really big chance and also a lot of fun. For me, in the past 3 years, the initiatives that I got involved with meant meeting many like-minded people, and this was a big part. And yeah, like I said before, I guess through this part that happened next to my original study plan, I learned so much more, and it helped me personally, but I'm sure that every one of us can be a small part in the change that we want to see in our society.
Yeah, and if you don't really know where to start, you can get a quick overview on your way to Mensa. There is the walk of AStA. You'll probably pass by, and we're so excited to meet you in person. So, on your way to Mensa, we'll be there.
I guess I can just second that, like get engaged in the AStA, in the Stupa, in the initiative, in projects, so there are many possibilities. I have one last question to all three of you. We have had very difficult times, as you know. We are still not out of them. It's still difficult because we're still grappling with how university looks like in times of a pandemic. So we learn every day. So far, if you look back at the last 3 semesters where we had mostly a digital operation, what did we learn? What did you learn? What do you think is memorable? What do you think is something we can keep? What do you think is something we missed? And what do you think there's something we need to take care of in the future to have a good academic life? Do you want to start? And last word have our students?
Yes, thanks. What did we learn? I think many of our persons from our teaching staff, like me, we learned a lot of technical skills. That's great. I learned a lot of technical skills in conducting the seminars and the lectures in digital ways, and that's great. I would like to keep it, and it was, it was big growth there. But what I missed very, very much was the real possibilities, the physical meetings in the flesh, real resonance. I was, on the one hand, I was really happy how well it went. All my seminars, the students attending, it was great. How to see all those efforts the students made, the teaching staff, of course, made as well, but all those efforts that the students made to attend the seminars, to engage actively in all those ways possibly. That was really, really great, and I'm so thankful for that. But on the other hand, I really missed the real kind of resonance I have with people being bodily together in one room, sharing one room as a seminar room, and those kinds of bodily resonance I missed so much, and I'm really looking forward to being on campus again, and I'm looking really forward to meeting my groups during the opening week, group 7, 8, and 9. Hey, hi to my groups and their tutors besides, and of course I'm looking forward to my seminar during the Leuphana semester, and I'm longing for being together as the community.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I would add that I think we learned in these difficult times to take care of each other, and I would encourage everyone to keep this, to not pressure yourself too much, because I'm sure that after 1.5 years of pandemic, of lockdown, of social isolation, there will be so many overwhelming situations. And I'm very happy that we can be here again on campus with people, with a lot of people in the same room. But I'm pretty sure this will lead to the feeling of being overwhelmed in the next weeks, months, or maybe in the next days for the first-year students who come here. And I would really say don't pressure yourself too much, and we should all take care of each other, and it's completely fine to feel overwhelmed, and it's also completely fine to face problems. And I want the first-year students to know that no one is facing these problems alone, because we all experienced these difficult times, and we are all in this together, and we can also get out of this together, and we can face the problems and as a community. And that's also, I would like them to know that we as the AStA, as the student representatives, we are here for the students, and we try to solve all the concerns, so if they do have any concerns, issues, troubles, but also ideas on how to shape this new part of our lives together, we can do this together, and I'm really looking forward to it.
What I learned from the pandemic is that there can come up situations you completely wasn't expecting. Like, I arrived here 2 years ago and was so happy to be here, and then a half year later everything was shut down, and I just sat in my room in front of my computer, and I learned that it's like okay that you're not okay with that situation, and it's always fine to, as you said, to step back and look after yourself. And it's, if you don't feel like taking 30 CPs, for example, then it's fine if you don't.
Thanks for your impressions. Thanks for your thoughts. And on that last note, I can also second that as well. I think all of us have experienced very difficult situations. Most of us will still experience very difficult situations, and just in my experience, sometimes, of course, it's serious, but most of the times it will work out in the end. You will find someone to talk to, you will find some solution at some point in time. Trust the problem solution skills of yourself and other students or professors or members of the university, or most of the times that's what will happen. And as you said, it's okay to feel overwhelmed. I agree, especially in these times. However, we want to go on. Thank you so much. And I now have the pleasure to introduce you to another guest. It's a welcome address by Karamba Dyabi. And in case you don't know him, Karamba Dyabi is a social democrat and a member of the German parliament, the Bundestag, since 2013. And in this year's federal election, he won his direct mandate in Halle for the very first time. And also he is an integration commissioner for the SPD Bundestag group and a doctor of natural science. Welcome, Karamba Dyabi.
Wir befinden uns in politisch und gesellschaftlich und auch ganz individuell sehr spannenden Zeiten. Ich erinnere mich gut an meinen Studienanfang. Zunächst in Dakar, dann ab 1986 in Halle an der Saale. Es war auch damals sehr spannend. Für den neuen Anfang brauchte ich Mut, ja, aber vor allem auch Solidarität. Aller Anfang ist schwer, so heißt es. Aller Anfang beflügelt, aber auch schenkt uns Kraft und neue Perspektiven. In diesem Sinne wünsche ich Ihnen und euch allen einen Anfang, der Neues, der Gutes bringt.
And now at the end of today's opening ceremony, at this very first moment of your course of studies at Leuphana, I want to end not only by asking you to be courageous in order to help change and grow yourself, your fellow students, our university and society. I also want you to ask, or also want to ask you to be present again. Here, today, of course, during the upcoming week, during the upcoming semester, in your project groups, in your courses, and during the upcoming years at the university, but also in the society. Don't disappear. Don't disappear when it gets difficult, especially not when it gets difficult. And don't give in when you feel the urge to hide yourself from problems, from situations that might seem either too challenging or too boring. Because if you do, nothing will change. And by saying that, I want to highlight that we have put a lot of effort in welcoming you at the university and also put a lot of effort in your first semester, even under the current pandemic circumstances. We don't know yet if everything will work out. We probably will experience some also difficult situations, but we want to have a dialogue with you about the semester. And we need you in shaping the upcoming semester. So once again, don't disappear because we rely on you. We, that are about 100 tutors that are there with you in your project groups. We that are about 40 professors right now in the opening week, scientific staff members and lecturers from our university who will guide you through your work during the upcoming week. We that are also 12 guest speakers and advisors from civil society that are there with you and for you. We that are also about 60 organization team members, organizers, mentors, logistics staff, and studio technicians. And also about 20 student journalists for the Startwochenzeitung that you will get next week, who take part in making this opening week a reality. Last but not least, we that are 4 deans, 150 professors at Leuphana, and 450 other scientific staff, also 450 colleagues in the administration, and we that are last but not least, about 8,500 other fellow students, together with you, our 1,400 first-year students in the Leuphana College. You'll meet in your cohorts later, so let me end by saying we that are also your 4 co-hosts, Professor Dr. Luise Görges, who is a professor of microeconomics, Professor Michael Koss, who is a professor of political science, Professor Daniel Lang, who is a professor of transdisciplinary sustainability research, and Professor Hanna Trittin-Ulrich, who is a professor of business ethics. And with that, once again from my side and from the side of all of us who are organizing this opening ceremony, a very, very warm welcome to Leuphana University. Have a memorable opening week and have a wonderful start into your student life. And with saying that, please give all of us the pleasure to listen once again to the Kizuma Trio from the Orchestra of Change, Orchester des Wandels, with a piece from Franz Schubert. So enjoy.